Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, the host, and thanks for joining today. How's your mama and them? I hope they're well. And also happy allergy season. That's kicking in soon, and it won't be long before you get episodes from me sounding like I smoked a road flare. For whatever reason, I probably deserve it, but my whole face setup doesn't do well with allergies. I keep eye drops handy in case I have a meeting with people that don't know me very well, because I'd rather them not walk away saying, you know, Joe's pretty sharp for a meth addict and has basically all of his teeth. Surprise, I don't do drugs. My eyes are red for allergy reasons. Hey, before we get going with your story today, this is your reminder to subscribe if you are a new listener to 10-Minute Murder, so that you'll always be able to find the show and never miss an episode, and also connect with 10-Minute Murder on social media if you have not done that already. If you have friends that also like true crime stories, then please let them know about this podcast. Links are in the show notes of this episode as well as at 10minutemurder.com. Now, to the story. There aren't many murders that could easily be believed to be accidents. Whether a victim is killed by a gunshot wound, strangulation, or stabbing, the cause of death itself often reveals that the cause of death is violent and intentional. However, there is a gray area when the killer argues that they acted in self-defense, out of fear for their own life. Out of all the ways to commit a murder, pushing somebody out of a window to their death is one method that maybe could be successfully passed off as an accident. Thousands of people die falling out of windows every year, although most of these cases are children. In the death of Josh Hilberling, who fatally fell from his apartment window, the conclusion was not so simple. In June of 2011, 23-year-old Josh Hilberling fell from the window of his apartment, plummeting 17 stories to land on the roof of a parking garage. An estimated 10% of people are able to survive a fall from a 7-story building, but often with life-threatening injuries. Josh fell 10 floors more than that, and obviously he died upon impact. The sheer force of the fall broke 6 vertebrae in his spine, several of his ribs, both of his legs, his pelvis, and his sternum, causing severe damage to his internal organs. With the young man dead and a pregnant wife left behind, one question remained. How did Josh fall? There was no balcony to slip from, and the window had been closed, so it seemed unlikely that the fall had been a horrible accident or suicide. One option remained. Josh had been pushed. But who did the pushing? One of Josh's neighbors had been home at the time that Josh fell, and he heard the sounds of loud footsteps that sounded like someone running, followed by the shattering of glass. When he went out on his balcony to see what the noise was, he saw the prone body of Josh on the roof of the parking garage and heard a woman's voice yelling, "Oh my God." But he hadn't been able to see the events leading up to the fall. Fortunately for investigators, there was a witness who had seen the whole thing, Josh's wife, Amber. But Amber insisted that she had not intended to kill her husband. She shoved him in self-defense, resulting in him losing his footing and falling to his death. Now let me remind you what the neighbors said that they heard. Loud, running footsteps, and then shattering glass. 3 detectives arrived at the apartment and noticed that there didn't seem to be a sign of a struggle at all. In fact, the only thing that was disturbed was the shattered window that Josh had fallen out of. The case was a little unusual because investigators had a rare advantage. They knew almost exactly what happened in the apartment in the minutes leading up to Josh's death. Amber and Josh had argued. At some point during this argument, Amber shoved him, causing him to fall out of the window to his death. What they needed to figure out was whether Amber had acted in self-defense, as she insisted, or if she had intended to kill Josh. One of the key pieces of evidence in Amber's trial ended up being a conversation that she had in the interrogation room shortly after Josh died, but it wasn't with the police. In fact, it was a secretly recorded conversation between Amber and her grandmother. Amber was distraught, sobbing, and 7 months pregnant. Through her tears, she confessed to her grandmother that she had killed Josh by pushing him out of the window, sobbing that she didn't deserve to live. In a damning piece of dialogue from the recording, Amber even says, quote, "I don't deserve to be a mom. Josh deserved to be a dad. Josh isn't even a person anymore." At the time of that conversation, Josh had been dead less than 24 hours. Amber consistently denied remembering the contents of that conversation with her grandmother. According to her, the conversation is a blur because of the state of grief that she was in at the time, and she can barely remember anything she said. In the rest of her interviews and during her trial, Amber never again implied that she killed Josh intentionally. She maintained her innocence as if the conversation with her grandmother had never happened. Throughout her trial, Amber insisted that she had not intentionally pushed Josh out of the window. She had only been acting in self-defense. According to Amber, her relationship with Josh was volatile, and she often feared for her life. Josh weighed 220 pounds and was 6 foot 5 inches tall. On top of that, he had a military background, which would have made him a scary opponent in any type of domestic incident. And keep in mind that Amber was 7 months pregnant and much smaller than the well-built, very tall Josh. So how had she managed to accidentally push him out of a window? And why had there been no sign of a struggle in the apartment if a physical altercation had taken place? Amber was not the only one bringing up abuse allegations. As it turned out, Josh actually filed for a protection order against Amber just over a month before he died. In the order, it alleged that Amber was physically abusive to him and had thrown a heavy lamp at him during a recent argument. Amber's defense attorney, a family friend named Jason Corns, pleaded with the court to give Amber a lenient sentence so that she could rejoin her son, Levi, who was 1.5 years old at the time. Jason also tried to appeal to the jury by painting Amber as a child who had a child, quote, when they were really still babies themselves. Amber's family disagreed with Jason's management of Amber's defense. Although he was a trusted family friend, he actually didn't have any experience in criminal defense, and years later, he actually surrendered his license to practice law after he was found to have withheld more than $1 million in gifts from an elderly client of his. During the trial, Amber's parents repeatedly suggested that she fire Jason, but Amber didn't have the heart to do so. Despite Jason's attempts to gain sympathy for his client, Amber's accusations of domestic violence, the jury did not believe that an accidental push during an argument could have led to Josh's fall, even if it was self-defense. Josh's dad took to the stand and told the jury about a phone call he'd received from Josh a day before his son's death. During the phone call, Josh told his father that he was going to divorce Amber, but he needed a ride so that he could get away. Josh's father told his son that he wasn't able to pick him up, but suggested that he call the number for a domestic violence intervention group who would be able to help him. This bit of information suggests what Amber's motive might have been. Maybe she found out that Josh was trying to leave her. The trial's verdict was reached. The jury believed that, in a fit of rage, Amber had deliberately shoved Josh to his death. On the 18th of March, 2013, Amber was found guilty of second-degree murder and given a 25-year prison sentence. Right up until her conviction, Amber was hopeful that the court would decide she wasn't guilty, to the point where she rejected a generous plea deal that would have reduced her sentence to only 5 years of jail time. With a 25-year sentence, her son Levi would be in his late 20s by the time she was out of jail. Levi would grow up with no father and a mother in prison. In 2012, Amber chose to file a wrongful death suit, blaming the apartment building's thin windows for allowing Josh's body to break the glass. In the lawsuit, Amber claimed that Josh's death had been a complete accident. This was at odds with her statements in court, where she'd claimed the death had been in self-defense. Despite being seemingly convinced of her own innocence, in October 2016, Amber could not take it any longer. Whether it was the guilt of murdering Josh that led her to her breaking point, or the realization that nobody believed she was innocent, Amber snapped and committed suicide. She was found dead in her cell, less than 1/5 of the way through her sentence, and the reality of what exactly led to Josh Hilberling's death died with her.